take nothing but pictures and leave nothing but footprints. You had people coming all over the country. A lot of the gangsters, Al Capone, Bugs Moran, they would all gamble up there. They would start their own businesses like the Ohio Club.
You're listening to the ATU Library Podcast, where we explore timely topics with professionals from Arkansas Tech University, the River Valley, and beyond. Hotels, amusement parks, hospitals, schools, cafes, all of these will be discussed today with our guest, Michael Schwarz. Michael, welcome to the program. So what got you interested in the concept of abandoned Arkansas?
Well, really, I grew up actually in Oklahoma City. The idea of abandonment always kind of caught my eye. And actually, on the way to school, when my parents would drive me to school, we would always pass by this abandoned church. And it was like this really big, it was called the Hopewell Baptist Church. I didn't know that at the time. I was a kid. We called it the teepee church because it kind of looked like a teepee. It was just long roof, that sort of thing. And my mom was like, yeah, this is the teepee church. And I was really fascinated by that. I was like, Mom, let's go in. And she's like, no, that's dangerous. We're never going in there. So I was like, being that rebellious kid, I always wanted to find out what was in there. So 7 or 8 years later, when I was able to drive, and that was the first thing I did, I was like, I want to find out what's in that church, what's left. Like passing it by as a kid, I always wanted to know what was in there. So there was always such a draw on my way to school, on the way to different events. There's always an interest to find out what exactly are in these places. And I would pass by one place, two places, everywhere I went. There was a group already called Abandoned Oklahoma, similar to our project here in Abandoned Arkansas, and I started contributing there. I found my own places and, started exploring and taking pictures. And then when I went to college in Conway for film school, I saw that there wasn't something like that here in Arkansas, and I was like bored on a weekend and I didn't have any friends yet, so I was like, cool, let's go find some abandoned places. And then I was off. Started finding hospitals, schools, bowling alleys, you name it. What we're trying to do is get every nook and cranny of the state. If it's abandoned and it's a building of some kind and it has history, you bet we're going to be there.
That is so cool. What is some of the first sites that you went to that really stand out?
The one that always fascinated me, actually when I first got here, I just started Googling abandoned buildings in Arkansas. Nothing really came up, but there was a hospital in North Little Rock. When I showed up, it was half demolished, like it was in the process of being demolished. And I was like, okay, let's see what we can get. So I went through and there's still some old medicine bottles and this and that. But on my way out, I noticed that there was this church right there on Share Street in the North Little Rock area, and there was broken windows, like exactly what you would think. I didn't go in because it was getting kind of dark, and I was like, I'll come back. So I go home and I Google this church. It was called the Glory Land Fellowship Family Church. According to Google, it was still open. It was like there were YouTube videos of it being active and this and that, and nobody talked about it being closed. There was no mention anywhere of it being closed.
Wow.
So part of me was like, okay, maybe they just went through, like, there was a storm recently, so maybe I just misread it, and maybe it's under construction or something like that. So I go back, and sure enough, it's completely abandoned. Everything was left behind. There were checks still on the floor. Like, you could see the roof, ceiling tiles starting to kind of cave in. Some broken glass, but there was even a drum set in the sanctuary, and the pews were all still there. Like, everything was still there. And I'm like, okay, so now why is Google... like nobody saying anything? Their Facebook page, their last post was like from 2 or 3 years ago. So I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense, but no mention of it closing. I went there like 20 times, like just taking picture, like trying to figure out what's going on. And I messaged the pastor there. His name was on the very front of the building, Pastor Cedric Hayes. He finally messaged me back after 5 months of contacting, or like just trying to contact his email, anything. He said, yeah, that church is closed. I'm really sad about it. Here's what happened. He told me the story. And so that was one of our very first places on Abandoned Arkansas. And it immediately drew me into that place and just trying to figure out what happened. I met up with him there, and he actually gave me a tour of the place. He actually he shed a tear or two. He didn't want that place to close. He never wanted to see, because it was a 3-story, like kind of a big church. It was a big family. He started a group called the Glory Land Pastors Choir, where he would take kids off of the streets who were in a bad situation, and he had them put that energy into singing, being a choir. They really did wonders, and I started following them and their adventures. Like, they got on America's Got Talent.
Okay.
They're touring all over the state now, but that church was closed. That church just stopped services and and it was weird. So it finally got demolished a couple of years ago. That church always really intrigued me.
Were you ever able to use this passion for abandoned locations in your academics? If you had a project at the university, this could be part of it you could turn in for a grade?
What's really funny is I did that on every project possible. Because there's a point where, when I'm in college and I'm learning and I'm doing the gen ed classes that, for instance, writing class, we had to do essays and this and that. One of my favorite things was talking about the Majestic. So anytime I could do a project about the Majestic Hotel in Hot Springs, Arkansas, I did it. I did that from my sophomore year. As a matter of fact, I think it was an art history class. They had us pick a historic piece of art, and they said architecture was included. And I was like, so I went up and I was like, hey, does that include the Majestic Hotel? She was like, yeah, that's fine. That sounds interesting. I've never had somebody come to me with this kind of project. I did even more research than I already had, found out architects' names and like the different renovations they did, the history and every step of the way of the Majestic. I documented its importance, like why it was artfully and architecturally important.
Some might not be aware of the history. Can you give us a background of the hotel and Hot Springs?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I did kind of just glaze over the Majestic there, but the Majestic Hotel was originally built in 1884 as the Avenue Hotel, and it was this wood structure that sat on the end of Central Avenue where the Majestic Hotel sat for many, many years. That building was demolished by Harry Jones, the general manager there, in 1902, and they rebuilt it as a yellow brick structure, and it had curved awnings on the outside. They had turrets on the top, and it was a yellow brick building. That was in 1902, and that ran until about 1926. Other historic hotels were starting to pop up, like the Eastman and the Arlington, the Baxter. At this point, Hot Springs was known for, obviously, its hot springs. That's what drew everybody to it. Like, families would have to horse and buggy for long distances just to get to this healing waters that Hot Springs was.
So did the Majestic actually have the baths inside the hotel?
They did, including the original yellow brick building. They had plumbing that would channel into the Majestic. They had spas and...
Was the yellow brick building beside the Majestic, or it was where the Majestic?
It was inside the Majestic
Hotel.
Oh,
inside the Majestic. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, sir. What I always found fascinating is that most people, when they think they want to go to Hot Springs today and they want to go take a bath, you just drive down there and you just get in the bath and then you go home. People back in the day, like doctors would actually prescribe the Hot Springs baths. They weren't going there for a couple of days. They were there to stay 3 weeks to 3 months. It depends on what the doctor prescribed you. So there were people who would stay there all the time. The way that people used to travel, nowadays you have Best Westerns and those sort of hotels, but back in the day, these hotels needed to be made magnificent. They wanted you to stay in their hotel. They had restaurants. They had, obviously their spas. The Majestic was almost like the city within a city, and you can still see that in the Arlington as well. It's not a place where you just go, get a room, stay the night, and then you leave. It's a place where you go to have an experience, interact with people, and you have meetings there. You have very, very important meetings. But they built these buildings to bring in those type of customers because they would be there for weeks.
Sure. When did the Majestic Hotel close, and when did you get involved?
It closed in 2006. There were multiple reasons why it closed, and it actually starts all the way back to the 60s.
Really?
Hot Springs, when people would come to stay for a month, 3 weeks to a month, or 3 months, business owners saw that as an opportunity. During the day, you're only bathing for 2, maybe 3 hours out of the day, so you have the rest of the day to do anything.
Right.
What other business opportunities would fit than gambling? So gambling started to come into play, and then that actually started to draw people who just wanted to go to Hot Springs for the gambling. It was actually the first Las Vegas before there was a Las Vegas. You had people coming all over the country. A lot of the gangsters, Al Capone, Bugs Moran, they would all gamble up there. They would start their own businesses like the Ohio Club. They were exactly what they were doing in Chicago. They were doing in Hot Springs.
Really?
Yeah, and Lucky Luciano was actually captured on the street in Hot Springs and taken back to New York to be tried and arrested.
Back to New York?
Back to New York, yeah.
Wow.
So you had these two great, thriving entities that brought people to Hot Springs. You had gambling and you had the baths. In 1963, Governor Rockefeller decided, no, we're going to crack down on this illegal gambling that shouldn't be happening in the first place, and they demolished casinos overnight. Now, in the 60s, at the same time, you also had doctors who found out that these hot springs aren't exactly a cure. So you started having less people coming for both gambling that doesn't exist anymore, anymore and people who were no longer prescribed the two biggest things that brought Hot Springs to its full potential, everyone stopped coming. So you started having the whole downtown area just start to go to the wayside. Like there was a lot of adult themed stores trying to lure people in, and you had different theaters that were playing adult movies, and the Majestic was actually able to survive until about 2006. Up until then, there were no renovations happening. They did one in the 1990s to the Yellow Brick Building. In the 1950s, the Arlington Hotel was owned by Southwest Hotels, and they bought both the Arlington and the Majestic. So they're owned by the same family that owned Arlington. So whenever 2006 came around, they were having trouble keeping occupancy in both buildings. Like they couldn't keep, or half of them occupied. They chose like, okay, do we keep the Arlington open? Do we keep the Majestic open? And unfortunately, the Majestic was always the little brother to the Arlington. So that's where we saw that choice of like, okay, we're going to close the Majestic, but we're going to give it to this company who wants to renovate it into apartments. And then that plan fell through, and then it just sat there abandoned, and everything was still in there. Chandeliers, bar glasses, beds, Persian rugs, like
wow.
Everything from there were old room keys that were still in there. It was insane, like how much they left behind. And that's not very typical with what we see.
So about how many hours and how many photos have you spent on the Majestic Hotel?
Probably over 500.
Wow, 500 hours?
Yeah.
Wow.
And that is not an exaggeration by any means, because there are three buildings to the Majestic. There was the Yellow Brick Building, 1902, 1926 Red Brick Annex, that was 7 stories, and then the Lanai Towers that went around the side, that was also 7 stories, and then there was a Lanai Suites around the side and a pool in the middle. So there was a lot to the Majestic. Now, in 2014, the Red Brick portion caught fire and then demolished the next day. So that night, I was actually in Little Rock showing one of my friends an abandoned spot, and then I had 7 calls. The Majestic's on fire, the Majestic's on fire, and I made it to Hot Springs in record time. I usually get there in about an hour and a half, but I got there in about an hour, 11 minutes. We show up, and it's just these big orange flames that I never thought I would ever see, and I was so overwhelmed with like, why not the Majestic? This was the best place. It was so cool, and I loved everything about it, and I was like, I'm gonna do a documentary on the Majestic. I said that night, so I started recording. I got a couple of interviews with people, but what I wanted to do was a documentary about the history and just kind of give like a little 20-minute segment on it, just so people know what used to be there. And then I found somebody who was like, let's save the rest of the Majestic that wasn't affected by the fire. And I was like, wait, I'm in film school. They said a movie is something that has a goal and conflict. I was like, I can see both of those things happening right now. So I was like, I'm going to do a documentary on the Majestic and the journey of trying to save it, and the rest everyone will see. So I don't want to go too much detail there. But that's why I have so much footage on it, is because I wanted to make sure that when people look up and want to know what was at the Majestic, you know, they can watch this documentary and know everything.
So tell us about yourself and how you got involved with documentaries.
Yeah, in about 2016, I graduated from UCA. I got an opportunity to go travel the world to South Africa, Australia, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Alaska, and Canada, and to do documentaries on children who are taking this workshop to learn about the importance of music and dance and gain the confidence they need to do anything they want in the world. And that was with a group called the Young Americans. So I got a grand opportunity to go do that. That was not a paying job, but who would turn that kind of job down, you know? So after that, I decided to move to California because that group was based in Corona. And after that, I got a documentary job there where we were doing personal injury documentaries for lawyers. And then I did that for a year and a half, and I started to work on a few movies, which is what I went to film school for. I wanted to be on set. The more that I was in California, the more movies I worked on, the less interested I became in it. You know, Abandoned Arkansas never left me. You know, I passed the baton on to Ginger. She has done an amazing job while I was gone, keeping up with the page and maintaining it and going to new places. And after a while, I decided, you know what, Los Angeles isn't for me. I decided to move back to Oklahoma City, where I'm from. I'm looking to move to Arkansas because I love Arkansas. I will go where the job takes me. So
You mentioned Ginger Beck. I think there's 4 names on this book. Who are the other people, and how do you know them?
Right. Of course, Ginger Beck is another author, and James Kirkendall, who we call the negotiator. He is the champion at getting us permission to places. And Eddie Sisson, what I am to the Majestic, he is to Dogpack. Patch. He loves that place, and he's still trying to get that place renovated and cleaned up. Like, he'll go every 2 weeks if he can with a broom and a lawnmower, and he'll like sweep out the buildings and, you know, just try and cut down the grass to make it look more presentable, so hopefully someone will come in and buy it.
There is an auction coming up.
And Eddie is...
By the time this gets aired, sadly, it'll probably be after the auction. If he wants to drop about $1 million, he can have it.
Well, actually, he's working with the owner.
Really?
Yeah, Stuart Nance currently is the one holding the auction. Stuart Nance and Eddie work very closely on trying to make it more presentable. Even though Eddie can't purchase the property himself, like, he is more than willing to help whoever buys it to make it the property. It won't ever be an amusement park again unless someone has a really crazy idea. You know, there's definitely a lot of potential with those structures. I mean, they're definitely historic. The funniest thing that I always thought was that Dog Patch was built to look old and abandoned.
True.
And now it's old and abandoned, so it fits really, really well. So hopefully whatever comes in there will be really great.
You're also involved with Abandoned Oklahoma. Can you share with us a little bit about some projects over there?
The projects Abandoned Oklahoma and Abandoned Arkansas are one and the same, just separate states.
Obviously.
I got you. I wouldn't say there's anything in particular happening over in Oklahoma that's not happening here in Arkansas. The reason that we keep them separate, though, is because it draws in a little bit more people when they're like, oh, that's my home state. You know, instead of like Abandoned Southeast. And then it's like, is that my state included? I don't know. So Abandoned Oklahoma isn't mine, or it wasn't at the time. And so I was like, if I'm going to start my own thing, I may as well just start it on my own. Yeah. So they became separate. And actually, the owner of Abandoned Oklahoma has recently stopped doing that and actually passed the baton on to me. So now I'm the owner of both Oklahoma and Arkansas.
Is it difficult to get permission from some of the owners? How do you deal with that if you come across the property that belongs to someone?
James Kirkendall is what we call the negotiator. So he is very persistent. He has gotten us permission to so many places. I mean, I have too, but this guy's a champion. And getting permission to any places, it's mainly looking at the Chamber of Commerce, contacting the city. It's just asking questions, really. I guarantee you that if there's an abandoned hospital and there are houses around it, one of those neighbors is going to know who owns it. You know, or know where to start. When you have an abandoned hospital that you live next to, you don't want it there, and so you'll know. It's just a matter of asking questions. Getting permission is always different. You know, sometimes they do live right next door. Sometimes they live in a totally different state entirely, and that's one of the reasons that it's abandoned, is because somebody doesn't want to own it, but they do, and they're trying to get rid of it, and nobody wants it, and so it just sits there until that decision is made. Sometimes it's owned by the city, and the city is trying to figure out what to do with it, and it's sitting abandoned in the meantime. Getting permission is never the same. I can't tell you how many times I've called real estate agents who put me in contact with that person, who put me in contact with that person, or and actually there's one place I can't say the name of, but we are actively trying to get permission for, but we've been trying for 6 years. Like, we keep getting bounced from one person to another, but James is on that case, and he has not given up. He calls me every week. He's like, all right, man, I think I got it. I know how we're going to get in there. I'm like, 6 years? That's insane.
How dangerous is it, and has anyone ever been hurt? Because I'm assuming a lot of scratches have happened.
Okay,
for sure.
Yeah, scratches, and that's part of the game. Like, if you're gonna go urban exploring, like, don't expect to come back in one piece. They are dangerous. Some of them are obviously less dangerous than others, but you know, you always have to be careful. Going back to the Majestic, the Yellow Brick Building, there were holes in the floor. There was constantly creaking every step that you would take. It would just be like keeping your weight where your foot was, and then exchanging the pressure on to make sure that the floor's not gonna. And actually, last week we were exploring this abandoned house. I did not do that, and I was going up these wooden steps, and that step just totally went pew! My shin just smacked up against the wood. I still have the scar to prove it. You know, you just got to be careful. I mean, sometimes the entire second floor is missing. You just never know what to expect.
Have you ever been scared from some of these locations, and have you ever seen a ghost?
We are not paranormal investigators, so I get that question quite often. No, there have been a couple situations where I've questioned things, like where I see like a light or like wind coming from an unknown source, but I've never been scared for ghosts. Now, I've been scared because I think other people are in the building with malicious intentions. That's happened quite a few times, and there was a hospital actually out in Brinkley. The city was fine with us going in and taking our pictures and stuff, and we actually called them when we heard people with wrenches like breaking things up on the second floor, and they actually came out touring it with us, trying to find them, but I think they had escaped before.
Were they trying to steal the copper or something?
I don't know exactly, but all we heard was stuff breaking on the second floor. It sounded like they had like a wrench against metal. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it was definitely something I'm glad we got the police involved because that could have ended really badly. Now, there are a lot of copper thieves. Now, obviously when a place goes abandoned, like that's the first thing that goes is the copper. And unfortunately, there's nothing much we can do about that except ask, please don't. When you start taking things off the property, when you start spray painting walls, when you start defacing anything that building was, it lowers the chances of the possible renovations that somebody wants to do. No one can be paid to maintain that building anymore. That's one of the reasons why it closed. If there's any chance of it coming back to life, the less damage that's done to it, the more likely that something can happen. And when you spray paint that wall, like that's just another thing that has to be done. When you take something off of it, when you deface it, it just makes it harder to maintain it.
I can really see you care about every one of these projects, and they're like your babies. What do you get from them when you have completed the project?
It's actually quite funny that you say that they're my babies because they, in a way that they are. Abandoned Arkansas has opened up so many doors and avenues for me throughout my film career and all of these things. So actually when people say, hey, do you want to meet me at this place? I'm always like, oh wait, that's the bar that's right down the street from the Gloryland Church or something. I'm I always try to. I'm really good with directions now, and it's mainly because I'm memorizing. Okay, that's that place, and it's right down the street from there.
If you were given permission, no problem, and if you were given a budget, no problem. What is some abandoned locations outside of Arkansas and Oklahoma would you be interested in?
Chernobyl, Six Flags. In Maine, there's a lot of abandoned places, old asylums, and Detroit has a lot of places. Actually, in Russia, there's an abandoned shuttle.
Space shuttle?
Space shuttle.
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
There was one that never left the facility, one that was a test. That whole section of the facility is just abandoned, has been sitting there for years, and I would love to go there.
What are some of the questions that people ask you about your projects?
Yeah, it's cool that you do abandoned places. Yeah, it's cool. I like looking at the site, but why do you put so much effort? And it's more than just taking pictures and uploading them to a website, because it's designing the website. It's doing the historical research. Now that we have multiple photographers, one of my jobs is to direct everybody and make sure that we have to post this certain location. If I just let everybody loose, there would be 10 locations posted in a week, and then nothing for. So there has to be a balance, and there has to. I get asked a lot, why do you put so much effort into this project, both projects? And the answer to that is just simply because I love it. It reaches so many different people. You have the avenue of the historical preservation, which is obviously our main focus. So many people have history at these places. So many people. I've always been under the impression that the comment section for our locations are just as important as the pictures that we take, because that's what makes a place come back to life. Are the stories that people tell and the pictures that are available to help. Pictures say 1,000 words, and if we take 100 pictures, that's a lot of words.
Right.
That's a lot of words, and the comments that people leave, and some people don't like what we do because it invokes those emotions, and some people are like, I can't bear to look at them because I don't want to see what that place, my childhood home. Unfortunately, in 100 years, they're gonna be gone. Other places are gonna be gone, and you're gonna want to look back and see and tell your grandchildren about the history that you had, where you grew up. That's how we thrive. We love to show where we came from, and that's what helps enhance the future. We have to know where we came from to know where we're going. Every piece of history is important. And the reason that we've really focused on abandoned places is because simply, if it's functioning, there's plenty of documentation of it. If it's a museum, if it's something, it's already being taken care of. It's the places that are forgotten, left to the side, even kicked to the side. The owner may not care about it, but we do, and there are people that care about it. Even if it's a small cafe in Pottsville, which is on the website, somebody has a memory there. And I think that's what motivates me to really keep doing this, is because everybody has a memory. I actually went to the hospital where my grandma spent her last few weeks before she was sent home and passed away. And I remember going there in 8th grade, seeing her in the hospital, slowly dying. I was able to go back, when it was abandoned. It was a lot. Seeing the place where my grandma spent her last few days, it really put it in its perspective, because I understand what other people feel. Now that building is demolished. Having a chance to preserve that was really exciting.
Can you tell us about some interesting places that you've been that maybe people don't even know about?
the Alexander Human Development Center, which was in the 60s. It was an African-American tuberculosis sanatorium. Tuberculosis sanatorium in Boonville would not take any African-Americans, and they would be moved to the one in Alexander. Obviously, when the desegregation became a thing, it was turned into a human development center. There were comments on the website where the nurses said people would drop their kids off and never come visit them. And it was really, really sad to see that. So they closed in 2011, but that building had been around since the 60s, and the police now are using that as training. They will not let anybody on the site now. We got permission before Alexander bought it.
What are some of the other interesting places that you can share with us?
The Home Ice in Magnolia was really cool.
What's that?
It was a ice manufacturing plant. You would literally just pick up bags of ice. It had these old pipes that would come down. It would pour into this big open tank, and they would just make big blocks of ice. And you could pick up bags of ice or a block of ice, and that's been closed since 2000. And their office has papers everywhere, which is really cool. Actually, just this weekend, we did a revisit to the Stryker Paper Corporation.
I saw that on Facebook.
Yeah.
I saw that. You guys were at a paper plant. Where's that at? Oh, you probably can't say exactly.
Stevens. I can't say the exact coordinates or the address, but it's in Stevens, Arkansas.
Okay.
And that's one of my favorite places right now because it's still untouched. It's a huge factory where they would make paper. I haven't been able to find any history on it. I've contacted the mayor, who gives me yep, it was a paper plant. Okay, thanks. I've contacted a few people who used to work there, but I haven't heard back from them, so we can only speculate. But it looked like it closed in 2001, but I do know that it used to be a roofing plant. It used to be the Elk Roofing Plant till the 70s or 80s, and then it was closed down and reopened as a paper plant. There's a location out in Mountain Home called Fun Mountain, and there's actually a slide. It was built straight into the mountain where you would be able to slide down and go up the stairs. It had a mini golf course. It had a bunch of different things, and it's just sitting there in Mountain Home, and with no plans, no nothing, just rotting away.
You might not be able to answer this, but have you ever come across any treasures or valuable items?
Oh my gosh. The list goes on and on. Every time that we go to a place, we go by the take nothing but pictures and leave nothing but footprints. And I live by that, unless the building is going to be demolished. Everything will be thrown in the trash next week. But also, if I take things, I don't take them for myself. I eventually want to put them out on display, or, I really want to find an avenue where I can put everything out so everyone can enjoy them just as much as I do. My prized possession are the original hand-drawn blueprints from 1902 of the yellow brick building.
No way.
Yeah, they were hand-drawn. I know a few architect friends who were able to confirm, yep, these are the original blueprints that were, and I think it was dated 1901. It was insane. And so those are in a very safe location until I can find a good avenue to display them at, because if those go away, they don't exist anymore. So I was able to save those. Now, I will say the Majestic is probably what I've saved the most out of, because it's now torn down, and I was there throughout the entire journey trying to save it, everything. So I knew it was going away. My philosophy also was, if we do end up saving the Majestic, everything I took will go right back into it.
Wow. Abandoned Arkansas has a great website. Can you let the listeners know about the website and about how to order your book?
So if you want to look at all of our pictures, which are for free, all of our history and all of our locations are free to view, abandonedar.com. And that is abandoned with the past tense. If you want to order our book, it's not just a copy and paste from the website, where we actually give personal stories about some of these locations, including my story of the Majestic, which you can read about, and Eddie's story about Dogpatch and his efforts. That you can go on Amazon or Books A Million, Walmart, Target.com. Also, I think Ginger for Abandoned South Arkansas, which is some of the southern locations that she talks about, you can message her personally on Facebook, and she can sign and deliver you a book personally.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for taking time to share with the listeners about these sites and your passion and love for Abandoned Arkansas, because we can really tell that you love this area.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that concludes our podcast. If you would like to listen to other podcasts from the ATU Library, go to our website at library.atu.edu and click on the podcast link.